people were not very smart. Their intelligence hadn't developed. Maybe they had a bicameral mind, or maybe they just had not, for instance, invented objectivity, and so they told stories. They didn't know about the world. And so not knowing about the world, they filled in their ignorance with stories. And they told these stories, and these stories became codified, and authorities began to say you can only tell certain kinds of stories. And so in these ages, people lived by mythology. And in those days, of course, there were, they didn't have underarm deodorant, and they didn't have electric light, and that shows they had primitive intelligence. Now, we've gone beyond that, and we now live in an age where beginning when we started to look at reality as measurable and quantifiable, and we begin to adopt a stance of objectivity toward that, and we begin to get control over things, and we begin, in other words, to move out of an age of mythology into an age of control, into an age where we're no longer passive victims, and an age where, you know, we are now the knowers of reality. We're the knowers. And of course, if we can know reality, then we're also the controllers of reality. And it means that in other words, that we have moved beyond not only the childhood of the age, but even the adolescence of human history into the full light of modernity. And to be modern means to be post-mythic. Post-mythic. Nietzsche said it in the end of the 19th century, says, God is dead. You know, the great stories, the meta-stories are gone, and we live, therefore, in a post-mythic age. And so, you know, most of us were brought up in a time when the way the word myth was used, it was used, I guess, mostly by newspapermen and journalists. And it meant more or less that something like a lie, maybe a conscious lie, certainly something that we couldn't believe, an illusion, something like that. And then almost seemingly overnight, that began to change. And I guess there are two what I think of as great symptoms of the change. Maybe three or four symptoms of the change. The largest one that all of us have probably noticed is the whole Joseph Campbell phenomenon. I mean, suddenly all over America, people are listening to a man who talks about mythology and tells stories of the gods and tells stories as if they were important to tell. And this is a new phenomenon that people should be interested in him. And not interested in him so much as interested in mythology. And a whole kind of public, it's been revealed that there's a public out there that we didn't think was out there. A public, I suspect, the same public that reads the book or has kept The Road Less Traveled for 300 and something weeks on the bestseller list. You know, you've got to ask, well, what is that about? Some kind of sea change, some kind of fundamental change in the way that we are beginning to perceive ourselves. And what that change is about has a great deal to do with the whole thing of mythology, because suddenly people are hungry for stories. And they are beginning to find out at a deep level, we are beginning to find out at a deep level, that the modern myth that we can live without stories, that we can live in a totally secular world, is one that's no longer satisfying. That's so that in a sense, the story of no story is not satisfying. But furthermore, the old religious stories aren't satisfying either. The authoritarian stories aren't satisfying. And so this whole new, what I call this middle group, this new, what I'm beginning to think of as a new spiritual reformation, is composed of people who feel that the secular world doesn't work, and the secular world is a world where essentially, like Jean-Paul Sartre said it a long time ago, we don't have stories. We don't have any organizing drama for our lives. And it's only those who want to live by an illusion who think there's an organizing drama. That's the secular world. And also then, but the religious answers don't work because they're not believable in the same way.